children of the night. What a mess they make. I am Count Dracula.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Flix Files. My name's Roger. So for today's video, I thought I would talk about a newer movie. When I look back at all the films that I've talked about individually, a large portion of them are from the 1980s. And I think the last movie I spoke of that you could call modern was the little review I did of the Mad Max film Furiosa towards the end of last year, because I thought that was a fantastic movie. And there's very good reason that I don't talk about modern movies that much on this channel. And it's a very sad reason. And the reason for that is there aren't many modern movies that I enjoy. There are very few. I could count on the fingers of one hand how many modern movies, as in movies made within the last 5 years, I've bought on physical media this year, and that is a very, very sad fact. But there is one that I bought on 4K because it's a movie that I watched on streaming and it blew me away. I thought it was fantastic. So I want to talk about that movie, and then I want to get into what it is about the movie that I really, really like. And I hope you're all enjoying your spring in the UK, because we've had a nice spell of warm weather. And while the sun was out and I was sat in the garden and it was lovely and warm, I thought, I want to talk about a horror movie. Because that's just the way my mind works. So, the movie is called The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And this was released, I think it was in 2023, and it had a theatrical release, and it kind of had a soft performance, shall we say. It didn't break any box office records or anything like that. And I don't understand why it didn't do better, because I think it's a terrific movie. And I wanted to buy it on physical media when it came out, but in the UK, originally, it was only released on Blu-ray. And the version that I streamed was a 4K high definition version. And so I knew that it would look fantastic on a 4K disc. So I did buy the Blu-ray version. I was quite disappointed. And then earlier this year, it finally got a 4K release in the United Kingdom. So I snapped it up. I got it on release day. And that's the version that I watched to prepare for this video. So, what is The Last Voyage of the Demeter about? Well, it's a Dracula movie, but it's a very interesting Dracula movie because it's based around one chapter of Bram Stoker's original book. And I have that book because way back in the early 90s, there was the other excellent Dracula movie, which was Francis Ford Coppola's version of Dracula starring Gary Oldman. And I love that movie. And back in the day, it was released on VHS in a very bizarre but interesting coffin-shaped box. And in there was a copy of the movie and a copy of the Bram Stoker book. And I've long since lost that box. I think during a house move, I took the video cassette out of the box, and the box got damaged in transit, and then the VHS was sold. But I kept the book. And I now have Bram Stoker's Dracula movie on 4K. It's just a terrific film, and a very good 4K. And in chapter 7 of that book, there is a couple of pages that's the captain's log aboard the Demeter. So for those of you that don't know the Dracula story, there's a point where Dracula, who's living in Transylvania, he buys a property in England, and to get to England, he charters a ship called the Demeter. And Dracula, in order to stay healthy, he has to sleep on his home soil. So when he makes the trip to Whitby in England on this ship, there are many containers that are just full of earth from his home ground. And in one of the containers, Dracula sleeps hidden away, locked inside this container. And it's one chapter of Bram Stoker's book, and it's testament to the magnificence of this old story that Bram Stoker, I think it was originally released, that book, in 1897. And it's just incredible to think that we're now having a movie that's just based on one little chapter of that book. So going into this movie, if you know the Dracula story, you know damn well that Dracula is going to be alive at the end of this movie, and that everybody on board the Demeter is going to come to a sticky end. And that certainly hammers the point home right at the beginning of this film, because the opening sequence is of the Demeter that is blown up by storm onto the coastline of Whitby, up against some rocks. And some local fishermen go down to investigate, and they find that there's nobody on board the ship. All the crew members are lost. So right at the beginning of the movie is kind of telling you that this is how this film's going to play out. And however many people are on board this ship, they're either all going to die or other things will happen to them that means they're not on the ship by the time it reaches England. So it's a very foreboding movie. And it plays out like Alien. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to see this movie, because I read an interview with the director of this film. And the director is a Norwegian chap called, and I've got to say this slowly, bless him, because he has an interesting name. It's André Øvredal, I think is how you pronounce it. And I think previous to this, he directed a film which I haven't seen, but that was quite well received, called Troll Hunter, I think it was, back in 2010. But in an interview, he said that he tackled this movie, and his vision for it was to basically treat it like the original Alien. So in the original Alien, there were 7 crew members and a cat on board the Nostromo that were being hunted by the alien creature. And in the last voyage of the Demeter, there are 9 crew members aboard this ship that are being hunted by Dracula during the month-long journey that it takes them to sail to Whitby. And I thought that was a fantastic hook for me personally to get me interested in this film. And having now watched it a few times, it definitely is Alien at sea. So if that alone piques your interest, then you should definitely seek this movie out and give it a watch, because I'm going to sing its praises in this video, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, the movie just basically plays out where they load up in the port of Bulgaria all of these crates, and the main protagonist in the movie is a character called Clemens, who's kind of a newly qualified doctor, and he's looking for a ride back to England. And he convinces the captain of the Demeter that he would be a useful person to have on board, being a trained doctor. And he gives him the opportunity to sail on board the ship. And it's while they set sail, things begin to happen with each night that passes that makes them start to realize that there's something on board the Demeter that's very evil, that's proving to be a danger to all of them. And it's the way that that story unfolds that makes it a really riveting watch, because it kind of slowly starts to ratchet up the tension. And to begin with, they see that the ship's cook realizes all the rats on the ship have gone missing. And you begin to think, oh, it's the old adage of rats leaving a sinking ship. They can sense that there's evil on board. and they've just literally jumped overboard. But then you start thinking, but is it Dracula that's getting out of his container when the sun goes down and he's feeding on these rats? Because the next thing that happens is they have numerous livestock down in the hold that they obviously plan on butchering and eating during the long journey. And in the first couple of nights at sea, they find that all the livestock has been slaughtered and most of the animals have had their throats ripped out. So you realize that as the sun goes down, Dracula is getting out of his little cargo container and he's wandering around the ship. And it's very clever how the character of Dracula is portrayed, because much like in the original Alien, you don't get a very good look at him for some considerable time. You just see brief glimpses of him in shadows. And he's a very interestingly designed Dracula, because he's very much a hybrid of a man and a bat. He literally is a Batman. And the look of him is incredibly evil and scary. And when you do see him for the first time in his full form, he is literally a man-sized bat with very evil-looking fangs. And he reminded me of the vampire that's in the original Salem's Lot back in the late 70s with David Soul. If you can imagine him, but a lot more sort of grisly and scary. And so the movie then just plays out where Dracula resurfaces every night as the sun goes down and starts picking off the crew, to the point that they quickly realize that something terrible is afoot, and they start to try and plan what they can do to get out of this horrible situation. And one of the things that happens is, during a storm, one of the crates that's down in the hold is tipped over on its side, and it breaks open, and all of the earth that's inside this crate spills out onto the floor. And Clemens, the doctor, goes down into the hold to investigate, and inside this crate they find the body of a young woman that's kind of semi-conscious. And he explains to the rest of the crew that he can give her blood transfusions because she seems to be very low on blood. And this he does. And over the next few days, he slowly brings her back into consciousness. And she explains that there is this evil creature on board, and she was given to him as kind of a sacrifice by the town where she lived in Transylvania, as to allow Dracula to feast on her. So she's kind of one of his brides, for want of a better term. So she begins to advise the remaining crew a little bit as to what they can do to try and kill him. And that's kind of how the movie plays out. I'm not going to go into it too much detail, because, as I say, we already know where the movie is heading towards, because we've been told that there's going to be nobody on that ship by the time it reaches England. The fun is finding out how that happens and how it unfolds. And the way that the director has filmed this movie is just incredible, because he slowly ratchets up the tension. And there are some really, really good jump scares in this film. I would say there are 3 really good ones that even when I watched it a second time, and I already remembered where these jump scares were, they still made me jump when they happened. They're very, very well done. And a lot of the things that I love about this film are down to the production design, because they did build a big replica Demeter, a big ship that they could control the weather around it. They kind of built it on a big water tank and had blue screens around it so they could superimpose in the weather. And all of the interior of the ship, and as you get down into the hold and the cabins, is all very confined and enclosed. Again, much like the Nostromo in Alien. And the cinematography is absolutely superb, and how most of the ship is just lit by very poor, inadequate lanterns that the crew carry around with them. And the 4K, the HDR of the 4K really makes that pop. And it's not a movie where most of it is in sheer blackness and you can barely see what's happening. No. There is enough light to clearly see the surroundings, and that makes some of the deaths in this even more shocking because it doesn't hold back on the gore. It's a very uncompromising horror film, should we say. And that's why I wanted to do a quick video praising it, because it's one of the few movies that I've seen in the last 5 years, new movies, that completely bowled me over. And I'm so pleased that it got a 4K release in this country, because it's just well worth your time. So the 4K release that I have of this film comes with the 4K disc and the Blu-ray disc. And it has the usual kind of gamut of extras that you would expect from a fairly decent release. It has a commentary by the director, and it has a couple of making of featurettes and some deleted scenes, and also an alternate opening, which I haven't yet watched. But it's a very, very good film, and I highly recommend it. I do say that if you like your horror films, which I know quite a few of my subscribers do, and you haven't yet seen The Last Voyage of the Demeter, then try and get a copy. I think the Blu-ray version of it is fairly cheap at the moment. And just let me know what you think, or if you've already seen this movie. If you thought it was really good, then please let me know. But yeah, I absolutely love it. And as I say, it was one of the few movies I've seen in the last 5 years that bowled me over. This and Furiosa. So there we are. That is The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I hope you liked that little dip into that film and the few little clips I snuck in there. And if you enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up. And I will see you again next week, guys. So take care of yourselves and bye for now.